Welcome back, level 2. Today we're going to throw our pitcher. You want to make sure that you have approximately 2 pounds of clay. If you want to try more, you can. Make sure you've practiced making a tall cylinder first, and then we're going to make our pitcher. Some things that you want to be thinking about for your pitcher is leaving enough clay up at the rim so it's nice and compressed, not having too much weight down at the bottom so that it's not too overly heavy, and then wherever you're going to be curving that profile outwards, to leave enough clay here at the shoulder, because that clay gets thinned out a little bit too much and then it'll start to crumple. Okay, so getting started, you'll get your clay ready, throwing on the wheel. Some things you might want to have at your disposal while you're on the wheel in level 2 is one of the sponges on a stick to get inside of your taller forms. Of course, your beloved needle tool that does not go in your bucket. And you all know that I'm a super huge fan of the sculpted popsicle stick. There's also other tools you might want to have, modeling tools and such. And if you go through ceramics too, you might want to start kind of designing some of your own tools or getting some popsicle sticks that you know are going to work for you, that you like. So anyway, I'm going to get that patted in and start my wheel up. Okay, so as you center, make sure that you cone at least 3 times. Don't forget, coning is really the last step of wedging, and you're getting those clay particles nicely squished together so that they're going to be more plastic and increase your plasticity. Also bring up any air bubbles. Now that you're in level 2, you should be using the nice, fresh bag clay. Okay, that clay that hasn't been recycled a million times. I call it bag clay because it comes out of, the bag. But you should use the bag clay because it's going to give you a lot better ability to throw thinner walls and nicer forms because there's more platelets in it, and it hasn't been recycled. It also won't have that gritty texture from level 1. Of how the clay was all sandy. All right, so I've centered. Now I'm going to open. Remember, for a cylindrical form, you want to open your floor so it's nice and flat. And you want it to be about 1/4 of an inch deep. The floor needs to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. I'm going to open this to about 2 inches. Okay, so maybe a little farther than you have before. I'm going to compress that floor, grabbing the clay from the outside and pressing it into the center so that I'm squishing all those platelets back into the center and we don't get any S cracks in the bottom of our pitcher. Okay, now that I've compressed the floor, one of the keys to throwing a nice big cylinder is to make sure that you collar that first time and get the clay worked into that trapezoidish style shape that we've talked about so many times, because that's going to really keep you throwing your work into a cylinder. So now I'm going to take my first pull, and I want this first pull to come into the center. So instead of leaning out, I'm thinking I'm throwing not a cylinder but a trapezoid. Okay, so I'm going to start my pull, pulling that clay up and pushing with my right hand, controlling the clay into the center, and you can see the profile here is more of a trapezoidy shape. Rather than straight up walls, I'm focusing on getting it into a trapezoid. Now, after every pull, if you collar just a bit to make sure that trapezoid is really coming in, compress your rim nicely so you have a nice thick rim, you're going to be a lot better set to make a nice tall cylinder that is giving you what you want long term rather than struggling with it. So I just slowed my wheel down a bit. Don't forget to slow your wheel down as you get taller. I'm going to press in from the outside, grab the clay on the inside with my middle finger and pull that clay up, 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 past the rim and off. Now my rim is starting to look a little bit bowled out because I just pulled that straight up. We don't want that to happen. So make sure that as you're pulling after each pull, You collar in just a bit. And if you need to, you can collar from the bottom and get it nice and even. Compress your rim like so. Now, depending on what kind of pitcher you chose, if you want a wider base, great, keep going from there. If you want a thinner base, great, keep going from there. One trick I want to show you that is kind of a review from throwing a tall cylinder is you can collar the bottom of your pot. So I'm just going to grab, and I'm going to be grabbing here with my pinkies. I'm just going to grab and collar a little bit underneath. I've made this nice little ridge right here. That ridge, since we collared in at the base, is going to give us a little lump of clay on the inside of our work. And that little lump of clay on the inside is extra clay that we can use to pull the wall a little bit taller. So now I'm going to get that edge right here with my sponge. I'm going to get right in there and I'm going to grab with the inside hand and start pulling that up. And with that extra clay, we can really pull something much taller than we had before. Now that belly there is bowling out just a little bit for me, so I'm going to come back and collar the base back in. Also, if your clay gets a little uncentered at the bottom, just grab it gently, start collaring it, and collar it back into center. Okay? Because half of the problem is getting your clay centered. The other half is keeping it centered while you're going. All right? Now I've got a pretty reasonable thin walls, even throwing all the way up. And I've got my cylinder. Okay? Now, I'm going to throw this pitcher so that the shoulder bellies out just a bit and it's a little bit thinner on the bottom. All right, so I'm going to just take one more time. I'm just going to collar in a little bit at the base. And now as I pull, I'm planning, throwing with intention, to have the shoulder about here. Okay, so I'm just going to collar the neck in just a bit to get me started on that. And now throwing with intention, I am not pulling, I am now shaping. I'm going to pull just a little teeny bit, mostly I'm shaping. So I'm going to press this clay in, I'm going to start my shaping. And as I pull this up, I'm kind of angling my inside hand out. Now I'm switching the pressure and angling that shoulder in, supporting it from the inside to get that collared, rounded profile shape here. Okay, now this is a point at which if you're having trouble reaching in to get the water out of the inside, use a sponge on a stick to get the water out. You should clean the inside of your pot frequently. Make sure that water doesn't rest inside of there while you're throwing. If it does, you'll have a tendency to have the bases of your work crack. Okay, and we don't want that to happen. Now, I'm going to collar in just a little bit more. And now I'm going to start shaping. Okay, my walls are nice and thin. Most of the main pulling is done. Now I'm going to shape. To shape, I'm going to do a down pull. I'm going to start at this bellied out corner here. I'm just going to gently press that clay downward into the shape I want, all the way down to the wheel head. Okay, now I've compressed those clay particles back down. I'm going to cut away that extra clay that I've pressed down, and I've got a pretty nice profile there now. Okay, I'm going to do it one more time, just shaping, coming up. I'm pressing out and holding my rib steady. Now I'm going to come over the belly. I'm supporting the clay from the inside. With the rib securely on the outside. Now this last part here, we've got the rim. I'm just going to pull the rim up, make sure it doesn't get too uneven or thick. I'm going to compress it, and then I'm just going to turn it out just a bit, because that's going to help us have a nice pouring spout on it. Now at this point you can decide a couple different things. You can say, well, you know, I like to have a ridge right here, because I feel like it gives a nice definition to the top. Okay, so you can put a decorative ridge. This is the point where you might want to do something to it to get some texture. Part of this assignment is that you are going to do a little altering after the fact, which is, you know, definitely something that potters do all the time. Very few potters will just be like, oh, now once and done, I'm not going to touch this, it's finished. Okay. In the next couple of videos, we're going to talk about altering. I'm not going to alter it on the wheel. I'm going to take it off the wheel first. A lot of potters will alter their work on the wheel, but I want to make a separate video just about the altering, and a separate video that's just about making the various types of spouts for the pitchers that I'd like you to try making. So, taking your work off the wheel. Remember that when you take your work off the wheel, you want to put a little water on the side. Pull that water through and underneath with your wire tool. And if your pot doesn't slide right away, put some more water on and slide that underneath. You should be able to see it slide just a bit so it releases. Then make sure your hands are super dry before you start picking up your work. Okay. Then I'm going to cradle it in the bottom, gently twist it into the water, and then pick it up and set it on my bat. Okay. So now that you've got your throwing complete and you've got your work finished, hopefully you actually got a bat. I didn't. You're going to let that dry in the moisture bin for a bit, and then you're going to alter it later. Okay, so thank you for joining me for your first video of how to throw a pitcher in Ceramics 2.